Fabulous. Okay, thank you everyone for joining me this evening. Hope you're all doing all right. Um, this meeting is being recorded, as you've probably just heard, so it should just be my face, basically. But if you want to change your names or anything so you're extra anonymous, please feel free. I am taking questions live this evening, so there should be a chat button below, and it should have just popped up with a message from LinkFairy. So please pop your questions in or send them to LinkFairy, and LinkFairy will filter them to me so that my poor brain doesn't have to work too hard. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Jo Southall. I'm an independent occupational therapist. I also live with hypermobility-related POTS and various other things. My whole OT practice is basically about self-management strategies and coping with long-term conditions. So this is your opportunity to make use of the wisdom I've accumulated over the years. If you have questions about anything related to hypermobility at all, I will do my best to answer them. If you ask me something that I don't know the answer to, I can hopefully just signpost you to somebody who will, and we'll go from there. So I don't think we've got any pre-asked questions, but I will just double check and then we can dive right in. Nope. We are all good. So, yeah, basically, send me your questions and I'll see what I can do about answering them. Lovely. First question, body braid for HMS, are they good / worth the money? Okay, so for anyone who haven't heard of these before, the body braid is a product that's basically designed to help with postural alignment. So it's a series of interlinking elastic straps. You kind of put it on almost like a vest or like a tailcoat, and then you can wrap the long bits around your kind of abdomen, around your hips, around your legs. There are extensions so you can make it full length, like round your ankles and back up again. And there's an option for an arm version as well. If you have a little look on the Body Braid website, you can see some of the different ways you can wrap it, but there are other options that you can create yourself. When you buy it as part of the purchase price, you get the option to have video calls with a member of the team, and they can teach you how to tangle yourself up in it appropriately. There are pros and cons to the body braid. So things I like about it as a starting point, it's a lot cooler for those of you who are heat intolerant than wearing custom compression clothing. So compression clothing like DM Orthotics or Jobskin or Allergies UK. I've talked about these on past episodes, but if you're not aware of them, it's basically like a vest top, but with like reinforcements built in. Sorry. One of the difficulties with that sort of option is that it is very, very warm, even though it's really, really brilliantly supportive. So the body braid is a lot breezier. You haven't got quite as much of your skin covered, which means that you do, oh, somebody can't hear me. Could somebody just give me a thumbs up that my mic is actually working? And it's, oh, yeah. Okay, sorted. Thank you. Yeah, so essentially, it is a nice option because it is quite a lot cooler. You've got a lot of options to customize it as well. The downside of the body braid is that getting in and out of it is a bit of a mission. Depending on how you wrap it, you may need to take bits of it off in order to get to the loo as well. For the most part, you don't, and it's kind of the same as peeing whilst you're wearing like a suspender belt. You can just kind of hoik everything to the side. It's a bit of a picture some of you will hopefully understand. But essentially, you just pull the straps to the side, sit down on the loo, and then you're good to go. It's still difficult to get in and out of, particularly from a POTS perspective, if you find leaning over quite difficult. So if you are that postural change of like bending down to wrap it around your feet and then standing back up again can be a bit difficult. It's very, very difficult to put it on completely sat down and to get the tension right so that when you're stood up, you're it's appropriately wrapped, basically. So what you may need to do is apply it sat down, stand up, and then adjust some of the tension and straps. There are quite a lot of different ways to thread it through different things, but you do need to be careful about counting how many loops you've gone through to make sure you're getting it symmetrically, kind of symmetrically like wrapped, basically. So I do think it is a good option. I have got one. I do like it. The other thing I really like about it is actually when you're sat down in it, if you wanted to just have a bit of a break and be able to slouch for a while, you can leave the bottom half wrapped and just slip it off your shoulders because it's quite stretchy. So it does allow you to kind of lay down without having to take it off completely. If you think the hassle of wrapping it up is not going to be too much of a bother, yes, it is worth the money. If you think the effort of tangling yourself up in it to get in and out of it is going to be more harm than it's worth, it's probably not the product for you. And I would instead recommend some kind of custom compression garment because they're going to be a lot more quicker to get in and out of. The difficulty with those is that the fitting process takes quite a lot longer. So you can't just buy it and it arrives in the post and you're good to go. Instead, it would be like fitted by an orthotist. You would have to kind of, sometimes have multiple fittings to get it perfectly suited for you. With custom compression clothing, if your body shape or body size changes quite drastically, you're going to have to be refitted. Whereas the body braid, it gives you the option to keep wearing it. So if you are a person whose body dimensions fluctuate quite a lot, body braid would be a better option for you, which is something I do like about it, particularly because as an option, if you find that you get bloated quite a lot, you can opt to wrap it round the back and side of your body rather than across your stomach, which is a good thing as well. So hopefully that sort of answers the question and is vaguely useful. But if there are follow-up questions, please do stick them in the chat. Let me look through. Next question. I get very sore elbows now. They go bright red, and I've bought elbow pads to help with this, which they do, but I feel self-conscious about wearing them in public, e.g. at my local chess club where leaning on the table really hurts my elbows. Also, there are synthetic fabric, and I really like cotton ones. Any advice on this sorts of thing? My advice for anything like this, where it's a lot of mobility aids, disability aids, and things in general are not the most attractive products. They are very much built in a kind of vaguely inoffensive older market in mind kind of scheme. Quite often they come in like beige, navy, and white. So actually to get over that confidence issue, taking a little bit of ownership and giving a bit of personality to things that you need regularly can really, really help. So if you were to have elbow pads that blended with your outfit a bit better, if you normally wear blues, as an example, dye them blue. Have something that blends with your clothing. You may find that firstly, it stands out a bit less. And secondly, you feel a bit more confident wearing it because it feels like a reflection of your personality rather than it just being a piece of equipment that is very off the shelfy. In terms of synthetic fabrics versus natural fibers, synthetics have the benefit of being a little bit more durable in some respects. So against friction in particular, which is why a lot of like sports padding type stuff tends to be synthetic. I'm with you on the natural fibers. Cotton would be lovely. I don't know of any in cotton specifically, but wool is a lot more common. So sheepskin in particular is used quite a lot for pressure care. So for people who are vulnerable to pressure ulcers, sheepskin pads are a thing that exists. The other thing that might randomly be worth a try if you wanted an option that you are not wearing but can lean on would be the gel mouse mats or like gel covers designed for desk use. So you could potentially just take them with you in a bag and pop them on the table in the area where you normally rest your elbows. If, as an example with chess, it's not like you're leaning all over the desk, I would imagine you would make a move and then put your arms back to the same sort of default rest area. So actually using mouse pads might be another option. And those would be a lot more customizable, come in a lot more fun patterns and colors as well. So that might be an option. The other option would be to consider something like Tubi Grip or like cotton sleeves that you could wear either between your body and the pad or over the top to cover it. So I think there is a big kind of psychological in terms of like using disability aids and using things that we need in public for the first time. I know I've talked to a lot of people about using mobility aids in this regard, so not wanting to use a stick or a rollator or being nervous about using a wheelchair for the first time. Quite often, the first time you just have to make yourself do it, or I set it as homework and they'll do it for me the first time, as an example. But if it's the right aid, if it's the right product, the benefits of using it will often outweigh the hesitancy that comes along with wanting to stand out, kind of thing. So you may find that actually the first time you do it, the benefit is so good that you just no longer care quite so much. You may also find that, as an example, other people who play chess have found the same issue, and they might look at that and think you're an absolute genius, and before you know it, you started a trend. So I think actually it's a really great idea if it's working for you. Customize, make it a little bit more, whatever your personality is, go for that. Um, and see if you can find something that just blends into who you are as a person rather than standing out. But yeah, I think actually it is something I might consider recommending to clients, if that's all right with you. Thank you. Because yeah, it is a really, really good idea. I do know a lot of people that find leaning on their elbows painful. So yeah, great. Okay. Lovely. Hello, we are early in the process and suspect hypermobility is causing some issues for my 13-year-old daughter and starting physio next week. How common are issues with lactose intolerance? Trying an elimination diet as a trial, wondering if it could be connected. Okay, so firstly, really, really common, but also I would be hesitant about assuming all things are inherently linked with hypermobility. So it is kind of natural for us to go, well, it can be a symptom, thus it must be in some way connected. But there's a difference between kind of correlation and causation. So lactose intolerance as a thing in general is really, really common in the entire population. So it may be that purely by coincidence, your daughter got lucky enough to get two things. That said, a lot of people with hypermobility disorders, because of the extra stretch within your digestive system, basically we're really inefficient at moving food from top to bottom. So things like constipation are really, really common. What you may find is that if your digestive transit is a bit slow, when you eat food, it kind of doesn't get out as quickly as it should. So you end up with like fermentation within the gut, and that leads to bloating, to flatulence, to stomach cramps, the kind of like digestion-y kind of crampy feelings, all kinds of things. Those are really, really common if you're essentially just not moving food out at the speed it needs to move. It sounds really daft and a bit gross, but one of the ways to test like digestive speed is actually just to eat sweet corn and track how many days it takes to get out the other end. Do you know? Because it is one of those things where there are going to be averages online for your age group, the demographic you're part of. What should your digestive transit time be? If you have sweet corn for dinner and a week later no sweet corn has made an appearance, you know you've got a seriously slow digestive transit. And at that point, gastroenterology referrals are what we should be looking at. Elimination diets are a really, really good starting point. Food diaries are really sensible as well. Often there is an assumption that things that are healthy are inherently good for your body, but actually, a lot of people find that there are certain foods that are considered healthy foods that are actually a big problem. So there's something called the low FODMAP diet that basically looks at things that ferment easily within your gut, and it's been particularly effective for IBS type symptoms and for people with slow digestive transit. It is designed to be done with a dietitian. So elimination diets of any kind, if you're cutting a lot of things out of your diet for an extended period of time, you are at increased risk of getting kind of vitamin and mineral deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, basically. So if you are doing an elimination diet and you're being really, really strict, as an example, low FODMAP, I think when I first went through it, for about a week and a half to get my IBS symptoms to really, really settle, I just lived off chicken and rice. Just plain chicken and rice, a little bit of salt, nothing else. It was super boring, and nutritionally speaking, is not a massively diverse intake. So I was on a multivitamin and things as well. The hope would be with elimination diets is that as you test foods and they're okay, you can bring them back in and your diet rapidly expands to be a lot more diverse and a lot more healthy and a lot more balanced. But some people do find that they just don't really get a lot of success bringing foods back in. So you can have people who are not like fully intolerant to things, but just don't get on well with large amounts of stuff. But if that's the case for a lot of things, it's very difficult to balance. So it is a challenge in terms of, balancing those things out. There's also something called the histamine bucket theory that you should be aware of. So for those of you that maybe haven't come across this before, the theory goes that histamine is basically supposed to be a single-use thing, and histamine that produces allergic reactions is a core part of the inflammatory and the healing response. So it serves a purpose within the body. It's not just there to break you out in hives, right? It does some stuff. However, if you have really high levels of histamine, if this little imaginary bucket in your body is full of histamine from all of these different reactions, you are going to be more sensitized and more reactive to a load of random different things. If you can calm your entire system down and empty your histamine bucket, you may tolerate having things that you currently don't tolerate when your bucket is full. So as an example, I was fully, very, very strictly gluten-free for 5 years. After the 5-year mark, and after being on antihistamines for that entire time, I could then get away with the odd little bit of gluten. And I knew roughly how long after eating it I was likely to get ill, which meant that I could start having sneaky takeaways again. I only get away with that if the histamine bucket's empty. Yeah, so actually, in terms of intolerances and allergies, if you are very stressed, if you've had a lot of reactions to things recently, you're more likely to be reactive to different foods. And if you're in that kind of very reactive, kind of allergic-y, coming out in hives, hay fevery type time, it's not a good time to do an exclusion diet, because even if you exclude all of the things, your body is still riddled with histamine and you're still going to have reactions to stuff. So it may be that actually it's a combination effect where what you need to look at is not just food, but also environmental exposures, hay fevers, pet allergies, all that kinds of stuff. And if you can calm everything down, daily antihistamines might be appropriate. That would be a thing to bring up with a GP. But if you can calm it all down, then you can start doing a true exclusion where you actually get a decently effective result on do I tolerate this or not. So essentially, it's a slightly more complex problem. I would recommend getting a dietitian. And if it's not just lactose, if it's like a lot of things that are causing a problem, maybe trying antihistamines as a way to manage that would be sensible, and that would be something to bring up with a GP. But yeah, essentially, it probably is connected, or at least is a kind of correlating thing that isn't necessarily cause and effect. But yeah, so best of luck with that, and I hope that the elimination of some stuff helps. The only other thing that might be worth mentioning is there's a supplement called quercetin. You could also ask about if you're seeing a dietitian, as an example, or a gastroenterologist. There has been some research about quercetin and its effects as a mast cell stabilizer. So basically, it reduces the amount of histamine your body releases, in the same way that a lot of histamine mast cell stabilizing drugs do. So, but it's not a drug. It literally just comes from various foods. So quercetin you get from like nuts and seeds, I think. So yeah, taking that as a supplement can help with intestinal kind of histamine issues, which can in turn help with intolerances. But again, 13-year-olds, if you're, just for the kids and teens, be a little bit more cautious, run things past the GP just in case. But yeah, if you have a look for Quest and stuff online, there are quite a few papers and research bits comparing its effects for like mast cell allergies and intolerances within EDS. So yeah, hopefully that sort of helps, but do come back with follow-up questions. Okay. Advice for somebody returning to cycling following an ankle fracture. How can we minimize risk of re-injury? It was a parkour fail, not a cycling injury. Boot now off and less walking. Okay. As the proud owner of many parkour-related ankle injuries in the past, yeah, fracture-wise, the difference here would be, was it just a fracture or was it fracture and a sprain? Bone breaking is probably the quickest and easiest way to damage your body severely, but have it recover quite effectively. Generally speaking, after like 10, 12 weeks, bones are back to being completely functional. They're great. Ligaments, nerves, tendons, all of the other vaguely squishy bits heal considerably slower, particularly for hypermobile people. So the thing about ankle breaks is that often, in order to get your things in the position to break something, you've also done soft tissue damage. Oh yeah, it was both. Bone where tendon attached came away. It's been 8 weeks, still has some swelling. Yeah, so avulsion fracture where you basically rip a chunk of bone off because the tendon has been overstretched. Yeah, the sprain part is probably actually going to be the harder part to heal from a hypermobility perspective. So in terms of like injuries, if you've still got swelling and stuff, absolutely not the right time to go back. And I know it sucks, and you kind of, as soon as you get the boot off, want to go back to doing fun things. Um, but I promise you, and I learned all of this the hard way, you are better off letting it heal completely before you go back. In terms of when you do go back, there are a couple of things I would try specifically. So from a cycling perspective, the movements that you need in your ankle when you cycle, so like toe flexion, extension type things, if you've got any pain at all on like heel raises or lifting your toes up or straightening your toes, you're not ready for the bike, don't do it. I would strongly suggest seeing a physiotherapist about that as well. When you do go back, I would actually have a go. You know the little pedal exercises that's just like two bike pedals on a tiny motor on a little stand you can get, and you can pedal in front of the TV. Get yourself one of them. And you can pick them up really, really cheaply on like Argos. You sometimes see them in charity shops and stuff as well. Amazon and the like are flooded with them. The reason for that is that as soon as you get any hint of pain, if you're at home on the sofa, you can stop. If you're 3 miles from home and you start to think, you know what, I've overdone it, you've still got 3 miles on the bike to go. So being able to have a little bit of a test drive just to see, and if you tolerate it on that, you can then start to think, actually, I can go out on the bike, but for less distance. One of the things I would have to think about would be your footwear and ankle support as well. So ankle bracing would probably be a sensible thing. At the very least, some kind of compression sleeve. So one of the issues that hypermobile folks have is that we tend to have really poor proprioception. So proprioception is your ability to understand where your body is in relation to the rest of yourself, but also your immediate environment. So people with good proprioception can walk through door frames whilst carrying a mug of hot tea and aren't in any way concerned that's going to end badly. People with bad proprioception, as in most hypermobile people, are the sort that would instead get the door handle stuck down their dressing gown sleeves, or trip over their own feet, or walk into one side because they were trying so hard to avoid the other side. Compression, when you basically add compression, gives your body more sensory feedback about where it actually is. So if you are proprioceptively not great, adding compression to that gives you a better awareness of your own body. That means that you're less likely to overstretch, to wobble around on your ankles, to hyperextend anything. And you're more aware of little hints of pain, little kind of twinges, slightly not good sort of feelings. If you were to go down the proprioceptive route from that perspective, that would probably really, really help with the getting back to cycling thing, because it would give you a better chance of being aware enough not to re-injure yourself effectively. So yeah, I would see how that goes. But splinting and bracing would probably be sensible. Even just tubey grip or a little bit of kinesiology tape would probably really, really help. Get yourself a pedal exerciser for the early days so you can test drive the cycling motion and see how that goes. And start off with probably quite easy, quite short rides where you can really focus on your like ankle and leg posture while you're cycling. Maybe something that isn't on main roads just in case it goes wrong, see how it goes. The other thing to be aware of is that our tolerance for all activities does not immediately return in the same way. So you may find that cycling is better than walking, as an example. So don't be afraid to use walking aids for a little bit longer if it's the walking that's causing the problem, but you can still go out and cycle. So we went to Center Parks like a while back, and I took my crutches on a rucksack and just collapsed them down. So I could cycle fine, but the walking was difficult. So I just had crutches on a rucksack, and it worked pretty well. But yeah, so see how that goes. Take it easy. Best of luck. Little and often until you get back to it. And I hope, fingers crossed, no more ankle injuries from other adventurous sports. So yeah, okay. Trigeminal nerve flare-ups seem to coincide with stress. Is this similar? Oh, trigeminal neuralgia is horrible. You have my greatest kind of empathy, and just yeah, I really wish I could magically fix that one. Yes, basically, as a population, we all seem to have, I don't know, like collectively gaslit ourselves into thinking that stress isn't that big a deal. Stress is horribly bad for you, like really chronic stress in particular. Chronic stress, sleep deprivation, the sorts of things that all new parents have, the sorts of things that a lot of people have at work, the sorts of things students have during exam season, literally compromises your immune system. It changes the way your body processes pain. There's all kinds of really horrible things that happen from stress. So I am not in any way surprised that stress is a serious trigger for that. So yeah, probably the whole experience in and of itself is stressful. So it's very, very easy for things like that to kind of create one of those downward spiral type situations where stress might have triggered it, but because it's stressful, it makes itself worse. Um, Very, very difficult, very unpleasant. What you may find is that that kind of acts as like an indicator thing where you actually need to get really, really proactive with stress management. And that may be relaxation strategies. It might be reduced responsibilities at work during flare-ups. It might be actually really focusing on good quality sleep, because sleep is how we deal with recovery in all forms. And recovery is what you need when you've kind of stressed yourself to the point where it's become a health issue. So it may be that actually when it starts to act up, you know, actually, okay, this is my body telling me that I need to take a step back and look after myself. So yeah, the one thing I would say that might be worth a try if you haven't tried it already would be TENS. So TENS is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. It's basically like a little box that gives you small electric shocks that feel like a kind of tingly, yeah, usually like a tingly sensation or like a buzzy kind of sensation. Um, it's a bit of a love it or hate it strategy. Some people just do not like the way TENS feels. Um, from the very, very brief experience I had of trigeminal neuralgia, literally any feeling is better than that feeling. So TENS was great for me. You can get tiny little TENS electrodes that you can stick on your face. You'll probably need to tape them on because whenever you talk, they'll fall off. But it does allow you to basically like zap your face for pain relief. Um, the only major contraindications for using TENS like that would be that you're actively undergoing cancer treatment, you have certain types of like very reactive epilepsy, or you've got any kind of surgical metal work like jaw replacements or pins or anything like that. Um, Generally speaking, TENS is pretty safe for everyone else, but it is a really, really nice strategy for nerve pain, particularly things like neuralgias, particularly low back pain as well. Um, so TENS would be a good one to try. It's the sort of thing that you can run for hours and hours, and you get a decent amount of relief from it often. But also because TENS itself is drug-free, you can also top it up with other pain relief or anti-inflammatories as needed. So it's a nice kind of stackable coping strategy, which will hopefully maybe give you some relief. But yeah, I hope that helps. Um, After my knee replacement 3 weeks ago, it seems I now can't take anything morphine based, whereas I could 7 years ago after my last one. Is this an increase in gut intolerance, IBS, gastritis, diverticulitis? Um, Maybe. Uh, yeah, it's a difficult one. From a mast cell activation perspective, if you are one of those reactive histamine intolerant sort of people with mast cell issues, um, allergies and intolerances can change a lot over the course of years. So I had a reaction to IV morphine. It turned out it was because the paramedic giving it had put the entire dose rather than into my vein, like through it and out the other side. So I got like a massive localized dose of morphine in one area. But I had a massive systemic histamine hives type reaction to that. After that, I couldn't eat poppy seeds in like poppy seed muffins or breads for about 4 years. And yet, when we stress tested it at the hospital, I was fine taking Oromorph. So, um, some of these things are literally just a complete mystery, and we kind of think it's histamine intolerancy, but we don't really know for sure. Um, it sucks. It is really, really annoying. And actually, a lot of the opiate-based painkillers are all quite similar. So, if you don't tolerate morphine, you may not get on with codeine anymore either. Um, Pain relief wise, tramadol is sort of opiate like, but not in the same realms as morphine. So a lot of people who are true opiate like um intolerance people get on better with tramadol than they do with morphine based stuff. But um yeah, it is difficult. It may be gut intolerance issues. It may be that your like stress bucket and your histamine bucket are just through the roof if it's been a particularly tough time of things. Um, it may be that using it before you built up an intolerance to it from the last exposure. So um yeah. It is difficult. Tried IV in tablet form, dabbled up and vomited. Yeah, my mum's like that. You get anywhere near her with opiates and she immediately throws up. Which is probably the last thing you want to be doing immediately after surgery, really. Um, yeah, it's probably something along those lines. Um, it may be that in another 7 years' time you're fine with it again. We don't really know for sure, essentially. Sorry. I realize that's a really lame, disappointing answer, but essentially it's a mystery and I can't tell you. Um, but research is ongoing in terms of things like that. And actually, a lot of people with long COVID have developed mast cell activation type issues. So I'm fully expecting a whole wave of breakthroughs to come through in the next few years, just because demand for breakthroughs in that areas has skyrocketed. So I think probably there'll be better research into mast cell allergy intolerancy, chemical sensitivity type stuff ongoing as we speak. And hopefully that gives us some answers. But essentially, I don't know. I'm sorry, but that sounds really unpleasant. And I hope you found some alternative pain relief and your recovery is going okay. Do you have any suggestions for remembering micro breaks? I've tried a timer, which I seem to ignore. I've tried using a task as a prompt. but when I work, it's so varied. I was doing the same thing. If I'm doing anything at all, I seem to just not remember whether working or free time. Okay, so micro breaks, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the phrase, is essentially just taking 10 to 30 seconds of not doing the thing you're currently doing in order to just check in with your body. If you're at the computer, blink, close your eyes, that kind of thing. Just do a little bit of like movement type stuff, roll your shoulders, get rid of some tension, wiggle your toes, all that kind of stuff. Have a sip of drink if you're one of those people that forgets to drink for hours. My normal advice for micro breaks is to link it with an activity. So as an example, if I'm doing computer work, every time I press send on an email, I'll take 10 seconds, a sip of drink, have a little bit of a wiggle or a fidget, and then I'll do the next email. This does get a lot more difficult when you've got quite a varied range of things that you're doing. It may be that you need to link it to something that you have with you all the time. So as an example, phone notifications, or you can set it up like movement reminders on smartwatches might be another option, because it doesn't necessarily work on a timed basis, but it will pester you if you've been sat still for too long. Yeah, task-based prompts are one of the things that I tend to default to as an option. So it may be that you need to find a different variety of things to suit different times at work. You could also try looking at what other people are doing and see if you can use any of that as a prompt. I think having visual reminders can be useful as well. The difficulty with visual reminders is that the longer a reminder is in situ, the less we notice it. So you just get used to things looking a certain way as you pan across your office or your kitchen or whatever. That said, very, very small changes can make a difference. So as an example, if you wrote take a micro break on 10 different post-its in different colors and shapes and just rotated them around your house and your office or whatever, the fact that you've got a blue one day and a pink one the next day would be enough of a change that you maybe notice it again. Whereas if you have a pink post-it note there, after a week or so, you stop noticing the pink post-it note. I have chatted with somebody before who basically did like art versions of self-care reminders. So she's an illustrator and comic book artist. And after we talked about this, she did like micro breaks as like decorative versions of that to have around her flat. So something actually like, the digital photo frames that like change images every once in a while. It may be that having it change would catch your eye enough that you look up at it and it will then say take a micro break, but in a different way as it goes through. That might be something that would just kind of keep you focused. But again, it relies on you being in the right area at the right time. So yeah, post-it notes and artwork might be a little bit more cost effective than having digital photo frames in every single room of your house. You could also, if you've tried the timer approach, but you find it's annoying, rather than turning timers off, delay them. So snooze it, and then it will keep pestering you until it is a convenient time. So yeah, I hope some of that maybe helps a little bit. Okay. Currently at work, so I may get called away. I work in a somewhat active healthcare job. Most days I'm fine, but sometimes I need a little bit of support with pain or dizziness. Do you have any advice for speaking with occupational health? Sounds daft, but I don't want to come across like I can't do my job in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so disclosing health conditions and getting help for health conditions in the workplace can be quite daunting. I think there's always that little voice in the back of our head that goes, oh, if I'm in the least teeniest way inconvenient, I will immediately get replaced with somebody else. You probably won't. It's yeah, I think we often think about and hear about worst case scenarios, but a lot of people go and they report things, and what they actually get is help and support, but that doesn't make the news because it was a good outcome. So please don't feel like every single time anyone goes to occupational health, they immediately go, oh, you can't do your job, we're getting rid of you. It's not always that bad. What I would say is that the way you phrase things can be quite helpful. So a little bit of pain or a little bit of dizziness doesn't sound too daunting. Pre-syncope, on the other hand, sounds really scary, but actually it's probably the same thing. So what I would do is focus on the fact that you want support to ensure you can continue to do your job. So don't go in and say, I can't do my job. Go in and say, I want to ensure I can keep doing my job as we go forward. And what you want, what most healthcare employers need, are people that can do the job for decades. That is the way we help the most people as healthcare providers, by being here until retirement age. So being proactive about that is actually a really, really good thing. And anyone with even a hint of common sense will recognize that for being proactive and good. So what I would say is have a think about, firstly, what support might you actually want? And does that even require you to go to occupational health? Because if you've got a good supportive line manager, you might just be able to say, would it be okay if, as an example, I used a wheelie office chair to get between locations? Or we made sure that there were always chairs in these certain places so that I can be guaranteed a seat, just in case. Would it be okay if somebody walks up to the ward with me, as an example, and they carry this heavy box for me? Often that might be all it takes. And if you've agreed with your line manager and your line manager says, yeah, that's great, give it a go, then you can just, as a formality, get it written up and sent to Occy Health. What might be more challenging is that you perhaps recognize the difficulties but don't have solutions. At which point, then going to occupational health and saying, like, I can do it for now, but I want to be able to find a workaround just in case, is very, very sensible. I think it's less daunting going in when you already have the answers. So I have done this with patients before where we'll have a session planning it, and then they'll go to Occy Health already armed with suggestions to take in. So that might be an option as well. But I think if you can maybe keep a little diary or a notebook with you for a couple of weeks as you do your job, every time you come across a task or a situation that's like a little bit more inconvenient than it should be, or you feel like it could be a little bit easier, then drop it in the notebook. And when you go to Occy Health, just go and go, these are the things that I've thought about that might be a bit more of a challenge. Can we just have a chat about whether we can solve any of these? It may be that there are some aspects of your job that are not modifiable and are inherently just awkward or a bit difficult. But if you can make all of the other aspects of your job a bit easier, then you can tolerate them a bit better. So sometimes it's not necessarily about solving the big dramatic things. Sometimes if you solve enough of the minor inconveniences, it frees up enough capacity for you to deal with the hard stuff. So yeah, essentially that's just a thing to keep in mind. But I would recommend doing all of this in a written way, just in case. Firstly, because if you do it in a spoken way, and anything negative does happen, you've got less evidence with which to go to a union rep. Secondly, if you do it in a written format, it allows you to draft up an email, sit with it for a little bit, go and read it again in a few days and see if you're still happy with what you've written. And then you can send it off. But it also gives the person on the receiving end, so your manager or Occy Health, time for them to not have to pretend they know what your conditions are, and they can go away and Google it and learn a bit more before they then come back with a plan. So I just think doing it in a written email-based way gives everyone the capacity to just take a minute, make a plan, etc. And yeah, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense and is helpful. And best of luck. I hope you find some brilliant accommodations. Okay. Just wanted to ask for some advice. I'm bedbound and would like to build up my confidence again. Physiotherapy won't work with me due to the risk of kneecaps coming out. Wow, okay. I mean, there are other body parts they could perhaps consider working with. It's not like you're made entirely of knees, but that's a little bit Um, yeah, that's frustrating and annoying. Um, what you will probably find is that there are the issues that you have that are inherently hypermobility based, but they are also in addition to and compounded by the deconditioning from being in bed a lot. These things happen. What I would have a think about from a rehabilitation perspective is what are the things that you know really irritate your conditions. So there's kind of two core aspects to getting back from being bedbound a lot. One of them is that your orthostatic tolerance, so your ability to literally be upright, will be worse than somebody who spends a lot of time sitting and standing already. The other aspect will be building muscle strength up and stamina and tolerance for movement. Um, I would advise against trying to do both of those in one combined exercise. So going from like laying down to trying to do physio exercises sat or stood up is going to be quite difficult. What you may find more effective is building your tolerance for being upright. And that may just be something as simple as actually getting yourself a wedge cushion and just sitting halfway up for a couple of hours a week, spread across the whole week, as a way to just get a little bit better at being upright. Um, you could also have a think about exercise methods that are laying down based exercise. So on the HMSA YouTube channel, there's a wonderful lady called Catherine who's done some gentle movement type videos, and one of the variations of those is a laying down version. So that might be a sensible place to start. The other person you could consider getting in touch with is Jeannie DeBon. So Jeannie's movement therapy approach, she's worked with a lot of people who are bedbound or have been bedbound and just don't have the upright tolerance for exercisey type stuff. So she would probably be the best person to help you build a movement-based program that focuses on actually building that strength, but without the extra stress of being upright until you've made a bit of progress with both separately. I'm hoping this makes a little bit of sense. So yeah, it would be kind of good to give it a go that way. Um, you could also, if physiotherapy have declined to work with you, insist on a specialist physio referral as part of that. So community physio coming out to visit you as an example, or referring you to a specialist physio, because there will be physios out there who are not in any way daunted by the fact that your kneecaps don't stay attached to your body. The Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital Stanmore have a hypermobility unit where you can go as an inpatient and do intensive rehab. That might be a brilliant option, but I would think you probably need to build up to the point where you can tolerate being kind of in a physical rehab situation for like a whole 5 days and then a weekend off, and then another 5 days, and then a weekend off, and then another 5 days, and then a weekend off. So there might be some kind of prehab before the rehab, if that makes a bit of sense. But yeah, gradually spending a little bit more time sat upright, or half upright, or like getting pillows and options to give you a little bit more positioning aids, and then looking at ways you can exercise laid down. If you happen to have a footboard on your bed, or you can get out of bed a little bit and lay on the floor for a while, the little pedal exercises I was talking about earlier, you can use them laid down as long as they're like jammed up against something so that they're not going to slide away as you pedal. So if you jam it up against the footboard of a bed or against a wall while you're on the floor, it gives you the ability to cycle but laid completely flat, um, which is really, really helpful from like an autonomic perspective because you're effectively doing cardio exercise, which improves your tolerance for being upright, but without having to be upright first. Um, so some of those things combined might be a useful approach. Is there anything else I can add in? The other thing might be to have a think about orthotics, splinting and bracing, adaptive aids for different activities. So everything you do increases your tolerance for doing stuff. So if you were to have a desk over your bed, if you haven't got one already, just the act of doing stuff, using your body more will be beneficial. But equally, if you've got body parts like your kneecaps that just do not cooperate, bracing them so that you can move enough to build some strength would probably be sensible. Otherwise, you're going to be in one of those 2 steps forward, 2 steps back situations where the minute you try and do anything, you get a knee injury and it sets you back right from the beginning. If you can brace your knees and any other joints that are particularly naff, you might be able to stabilize enough to exercise to then build some strength. And then the next step way down the line after that would be to phase yourself out of needing the braces. But it would at least get you moving enough that you could make some progress, hopefully with your legs attached in all the places they're supposed to be attached in. Orthotics, compression clothing, that kind of thing. If you spoke to your GP, could get a referral to an NHS orthotist where they will basically fit and measure you for whatever braces are needed to hold your body together. Custom compression clothing is a good option for that because it's soft enough that you can lay down in it. So in the kind of the phase where you're trying to build your tolerance for being upright a bit more, but you do still need to lay down quite a lot, you could stay in your compression clothing, take laying down breaks and keep going. Whereas something like the slightly more intensively rigid braces, they're not particularly comfortable to rest in. So you may need to take them off in between like rest breaks, which uses all your energy up kind of thing. So compression clothing, I think, would be a really sensible thing to have a look at as well. Hopefully some of that helps. Okay. Tramadol sometimes produces more profound intolerance, as with myself. I'd avoided opiates personally for quite a few years, and now morphine is tolerable. Yeah, fair point. I mean, drug reactions at the best of times are all over the place. Weirdly, they seem to run in families sometimes. So almost nobody in my family tolerates codeine, and those of us that do tolerate codeine don't get a particularly good effect from it. It's weird. Yeah, like some other hypermobile people, I need a pretty massive dose of whatever anesthetic / painkiller I have to reduce intolerance and conversely accommodation. Yeah, so dosing again can be effective, particularly for local anesthetics. Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, but other hypermobility types as well, make you what is technically called, I think, a variant responder. But basically you won't respond to anesthetic in the way that you're supposed to. That may mean you need more, or you may mean different. Dose wise, again, things like painkillers. The other thing that can sometimes be effective would be combinations of drugs at low doses rather than one drug at a very high dose. So things like amitriptyline, your nortriptylines, your pregabalins, your gabapentins, all the kind of antineuropathic drugs. A lot of people don't tolerate them especially well at really, really high doses. But at lower doses, you can sometimes get away with having, say, pregabalin during the day and amitriptyline overnight. The contraindication for that would be like serotonin syndrome type things. So there will be symptoms you need to watch out for. It does need to be monitored, and your dose does need to be carefully calculated and titrated up. But yeah, essentially a little bit of creative thinking when it comes to prescribing is sometimes needed. Often if your GP is not confident with that, then getting a referral to pain clinic can be useful. Pain clinic, I think, are a bit more experienced at juggling a lot of different medications, and they will have a lot more clinical experience treating pain in people who maybe don't respond as they're supposed to, or don't tolerate some of the more common prescription options. A thing to be aware of in terms of like the hypermobility stuff is that we're all playing the long game. If you are playing a short-term surgical recovery situation, you don't have to worry too much about building a tolerance to a drug. Most of us are going to be in pain our entire lives, right? So if you're building tolerances to a lot of different drugs in your teens, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, you've hopefully got quite a few years left. They don't invent new painkillers all that often. And a lot of the new antineuropathic drugs are just variations on the old stuff. So you do need to kind of have that conversation with whoever's prescribing about the fact that you need to have somewhere to go. So if you're maxed out on all of your drugs for your day-to-day pain, and then you have a severe flare-up and there's nothing left they can give you, that's not a great situation to be in. So, having a think about how you balance pain relief versus being aware of the fact that you are going to need to have somewhere to go if things get worse, or you have an acute injury or a surgery or something, um, is worth having a discussion about, particularly for things like your steroid injections, where you only get a certain number. So for everyone, but particularly for hypermobile people, cortisone steroid injections give you a massively increased risk of tendon rupture. So steroid injections, the clinical advice is you're only supposed to have 3 in any one joint area. I'm 35 and I've had 2 each in each hip. So I've got 1 left and I'm rationing it really, really carefully. So that kind of thing, just be aware that you do need to think long term. And I think a lot of like GPs and the like are used to thinking short term, and they're used to dealing with acute illnesses and acute pain. Chronic pain is a different beast. And chronic pain that comes along with acute episodes of intense acute pain is again a slightly more complicated situation. So if you are struggling with pain management medication wise, seeing a specialist in a pain clinic is a sensible thing to do. And if you think you're going to be in a situation where you're okay for now, but you're worried about what the future looks like, again, ask for a referral, have that conversation early so that you've got a plan in place. And hopefully it will give you a little bit of stress relief as well, knowing that there are things that you can do going forwards. So yeah, thanks for that, Tom. Lovely. Okay, lovely. Last little bit for this evening, because I think rather miraculously I've managed to get through all of the questions with exactly the right amount of time. Let me just have a quick scroll through. Lovely. I think we're there. Good, good, good. Yeah, yeah. Lovely. Okie dokie. So that's that. Thank you all very much for coming this evening, and thank you for your interesting questions. I really like kind of all the different things that come up in these. So it's a nice little challenge for me each month. LinkFairy and I are taking a break next month. I'm off in a Viking reenactment event. So I will be in a field somewhere pretending to be a Viking for the whole time, and it's going to be great. So apologies for skipping out on you next month, but I will be back in August. Please do continue to send all of your like questions and things in if you've got them, and I will just have a longer list of pre-asked questions to start in the August one as well. As always, your feedback is greatly appreciated. So if you have a couple of minutes to just send some comments over, we would love that. It does make a difference to how we run these sessions. So, tell me if I'm doing a good job. Tell me if I'm doing a bad job. Tell me what you'd like to see, and we'll try and make it happen in, the next year or the next episode or whatever. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and yeah, enjoy your evening, and I'll see you in 2 months' time. Thanks. Bye.